Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and welcome to the 8th Annual Rumi Peace and Dialogue Awards. My name is Jenna Ledke. I am the Director of Interfaith and Intercultural Affairs at the Rumi Forum, and I will be your host this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are also celebrating the Rumi Forum's 15th anniversary. For this year's awards ceremony, a special edition program, which you'll find at your tables, was printed commemorating and highlighting many of the activities the Forum has been involved in over the past 15 years. The Rumi Forum was founded in 1999 with the mission to foster intercultural dialogue, stimulate thinking, and exchange of opinions on supporting and fostering democracy. Also fostering peace to provide a common platform for education and information exchange. The Forum contributes to this ultimate aim by means of conferences, panel discussions, community engagement, luncheons, publications, and other activities. In particular, the Forum has an interest in issues regarding pluralism, peace building, and conflict resolution, intercultural and interfaith dialogue, social harmony and justice, civil rights, and community action. The annual Rumi Peace and Dialogue Awards pays tribute to the life and contributions of Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, the Forum's namesake. The Rumi Awards honors extraordinary individuals and organizations who have greatly contributed and dedicated their time, energy, and leadership to the causes of dialogue, understanding, peace, and community service. Ladies and gentlemen, now please welcome to the stage the President of the National Press Club, Myron Belkind.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. As Jenna mentioned, my name is Myron Belkind, and I'm honored to welcome you to the National Press Club as its 107th president and the first since its founding in 1908 to have had a long career internationally as a foreign correspondent and bureau chief for the Associated Press, reporting from countries throughout South Asia, including India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sikkim, Bhutan, and Sri Lanka, as well as from Indonesia, Malaysia, Burma, England, and Japan. I'm now an adjunct professor at the George Washington University School of Media Public Affairs and Graduate School of Political Management. I mentioned my 4 decades of international journalism experience because I hope you feel that makes me qualified to say objectively and accurately, as journalists always have to do, how honored I am to be asked to give these welcome remarks at the 8th Annual Rumi Peace and Dialogue Awards dinner that recognizes and honors the importance of peace building, interfaith and intercultural dialogue, and the importance of understanding people from different worldviews and backgrounds. The Rumi Forum's principal goal is, of course, to promote peace in the world and contribute to a peaceful coexistence of the followers of different faiths, cultures, ethnicities, and races. As someone who has covered many conflicts, I can honestly say that those conflicts could well have been avoided had the goals of the Rumi Forum been followed. And thus I want to salute the Rumi Forum as it celebrates its 15th anniversary this year, and its president, Emre Celik, for all the very hard work carried out to promote these goals, including by recognizing the recipients of its annual awards, which this year are being bestowed on Dr. Azizah al-Hibri, founder and chair of Karama, for her service on behalf of women and human rights. The Reverend David Beckmann, president of Bread for the World and Alliance to End Hunger, for his service to the community. And Dr. Rebbecca Winthrop, Director of the Center for Universal Education at the Brookings Institution, for her service to education. Ladies and gentlemen, you can understand why I feel passionately about the truly outstanding work done by the Rumi Forum, and why we are so honored that this awards dinner is being held for the 5th consecutive year at the National Press Club, the world's leading professional organization for journalists. My very deepest thanks to the Rumi Forum and my very best wishes to everyone here for what I know will be a very memorable evening. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's now my great pleasure to introduce the president of the Rumi Forum, Emre Celik. Please welcome him to the stage.
Your Excellencies, award recipients, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It gives me great pleasure to warmly welcome each and every one of you to the 8th Annual Rumi Peace and Dialogue Awards. These annual awards highlight the achievements of individuals that have dedicated their lives and their efforts and contributed significantly to the cause of peace, dialogue and understanding, service to others, and our shared humanity. The Rumi Forum, founded in 1999, hopes to bring together people of different backgrounds around the ideals of serving society and increasing social cohesion through projects of engagement, education and dialogue, while overcoming ignorance and prejudice both at an intellectual and grassroots level. In 2014, the Forum is proud to celebrate its 15th year, a remarkable milestone. More on that from our founding president, who honours us today. The Rumi Forum has moved into the sphere of various community-based aid projects, among them distribution of food to the needy in Southwest DC, collecting donations for Syrian refugees through Embrace Relief, and the flyer for that is before you, so please kindly consider assisting, and a new campaign with our partners in Fairfax for collecting blankets for this upcoming winter, also for refugees. Mr. Fethullah Gulen, our honorary president, has motivated similar organisations to our forum around the world that espouse our shared values within the framework of democracy and respect for human rights. Dedicated to this cause, Mr. Gulen's statement, Countering Violence and Terrorism, was published last month in 5 daily newspapers, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal. The Forum will soon establish a Centre for Non-Violence that will work on such current and important issues. The main event, of course, tonight is to celebrate and reflect upon the successes and the example of our award recipients. These awards reflect the sincere efforts of each one of the recipients' service to their fellow human being. We are privileged to have them among us and congratulate each and every one of them for their good work. It is my hope that we can all incorporate into our lives the motivation that drives such success and service. I wish you all a most pleasant evening, and beyond tonight, look forward to continuing the dialogue. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy your dinner, conversations at the table, and we'll see you back in about a half hour. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, good evening once again. Hope you enjoyed your meal and conversation. We're now going to begin our formal program of the evening. It's now my sincere honor and pleasure to introduce Don Wallace. Don Wallace is the chairman of the International Law Institute here in Washington, D.C., and he is professor of law at Georgetown University Law Center. Professor Wallace is a Rumi Forum Advisory Board member, and he will be introducing our keynote speaker for the evening. Please welcome him to the stage.
I'll try to be almost as brief as Jenna. I'm to introduce Carol Bellamy. I think she's probably known to many of you. She's going to speak about education and how it contributes to peace. I think all of you know that the Rumi Forum takes its name from Rumi Jalaluddin, who was a thinker, a poet, a mystic, who believed in the life of the mind. We believe in the life of the mind, and we try to promote it. Carol, I'm very happy to have sat next to her because she was the head of UNICEF, and her predecessor was my boss for many years, and we chatted a bit about that. She's been the head of the Peace Corps. She told me that she's the first Peace Corps volunteer who then became the director. There have been some since. She's been a Paul. She was chairman of the New York City Council. She ran for mayor unsuccessfully, but you know, it was honorable. And as far as education goes, she was the head of World Learning, which to me was known as the Experiment in International Living, which actually is a part of it. And I think you'll find her a very impressive speaker. She's a very formidable neighbor at supper.
Thank you very much, Don. Actually, there was a period in my life when I'd been a New York corporate lawyer, a New York City and state politician, and an investment banker. I only needed to do real estate, and then I would have been in every sleazy profession that your parents would never mention to their friends that you'd been involved in. But it has been my pleasure over the last few years to be involved in international work, although I loved my time as a lawyer and a banker and a politician. Excellencies, honorees, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here to participate in this forum. It's nice to be with people who want to talk about peace and dialogue and issues that one wishes more people were concerning themselves with. It's a humbling experience to be here with all of you tonight, and to particularly be here to honor three inspirational colleagues and friends. All three of them embody the true spirit of that centuries-old message of inclusion, and all of them have given it a vital modern slant by framing their work in a way that promotes fundamental human rights and dialogue. All three have been fearless in challenging assumptions, whether on the rights of women in Islam, on hunger and education, and on human rights generally, to increase the sum of human knowledge and to create a world that is more just, more fair, and more peaceful. By the way, I just want to say, feel free to continue to eat if you're still eating. Again, if I might mention, I was the president of the New York City Council. They kept eating all the time when I was presiding over them. So I'm going to share with you some of my thinking this evening, but I don't want you to leave feeling as though you weren't able to have a good full meal. So a couple words about our honorees. Azizah, who could fail to be impressed by the work, your work and the work of your organization, Muslim Women Lawyers for Human Rights, which positions education and dialogue as the best tools to eradicate ignorance, silence, and prejudice. By challenging the myths about the rights afforded to women within Islam, you represent a crystal clear voice of reason to challenge stereotypes and misconceptions. And you do so at a critical moment when understanding is needed more than ever. David, I've been a fan of yours forever, by the way. Your work to keep the issue of hunger high on the agenda is critical, and your leadership in the NGO community as well. As the world finalizes a new set of development goals, Bread for the World and the Alliance to End Hunger reminds us that more than 800 million people around the world suffer from hunger each and every day. You remind us that no country is immune, that hunger haunts even the world's richest country, with almost 50 million Americans struggling to put food on the table. You remind us that the job on hunger is very far from being over. And you strive to build the partnerships across U.S. institutions, Muslim and Jewish groups, corporations, unions, and universities, to build the political will that is what is vital to get the job done once and for all. And Rebbecca, Your work has been invaluable over the years in pushing the world to go further and to dig deeper on education. And I'll have more to say in a few minutes about you. If you know me, obviously you'll know I have a vested interest in education, given my role as at World Learning and as chair of the I'm presently chair of the International Baccalaureate and as the former chair of the Global Partnership for Education, and also my time at UNICEF. But I want to stress the interconnectedness of every part of social development to every aspect of human rights. Education is chained to the achievement of all other human rights, whether it is freedom from hunger, gender equity, or the rolling back of poverty. It is only by understanding the world around us that we have any hope of changing it. And it is education that connects us to that world and to each other. We've learned over the past 2 decades, since the adoption of the Millennium Development Goals, the MDGs, that there is no progress in isolation. No development goal has been reached, or indeed will be reached, without progress elsewhere. Equally, a lack of progress in one area acts as a brake on everything else. As a result, we've seen some astounding achievements in some areas over the past 2 decades, but we also must acknowledge some very deep disappointments. On the plus side, we've seen the halving of the number of people living in extreme poverty at the global level, with around 700 million fewer people living in extreme poverty in 2010 than in 1990. We've seen the halving of the proportion of people without sustainable access to improved sources of drinking water. 5 years, actually, before the 2015 deadline, and despite population growth. We've seen impressive progress on preventable diseases, with malaria and tuberculosis, in particular, in retreat. And we've seen progress on education, with the number of children out of school falling by almost half. Not quite. The hunger reduction target is almost within our grasp, halving the percentage of people who go to bed hungry each night. But, and how wonderful it would be if we could not have to say but, as David's work shows us, we still have a long journey ahead on hunger. And when it comes to poverty, we have learned that a rising tide does not, in fact, lift all ships. There are people who are continually sidelined by economic growth. The falling number of children's deaths, child deaths, has revealed child mortality rates that are now concentrated in the poorest regions and in the very first month, not months, but month of life. And we still have almost 800 girls and women dying each and every day during pregnancy and childbirth. That's almost 300,000 each year, dying from causes that are preventable. For all the progress on primary school enrollment, we still have about 60 million children out of school, roughly equal to the entire population of Italy. And progress has stalled. We have reached the children who could be pulled into education by providing more schools and more teachers, but there are many others out of school and who will stay out of school for reasons that have nothing to do with the availability of a school. They are the most marginalized children, the poorest of the poor, the children from particular ethnic minorities, children with disabilities. They are girls, and increasingly they are children caught up in war. Indeed, children caught up in war now account for about 1/4 of the world's children of primary school age, but about half of those are out of school. Children in conflict-affected countries are nearly 3 times more likely to be out of primary school than children in other low-income countries. And their secondary enrollment rates are nearly 1/3 lower. These countries in conflict or war, have some of the largest gender disparities and the lowest literacy levels in the world. A very unhealthy and, frankly, a very dangerous situation. Schools themselves are often on the firing line, with classrooms, teachers, and pupils seen as legitimate targets. The impact is, as one UN report has put it, and I quote, "a growing fear among children to attend school, among teachers to give classes, and among parents to send their children to school." The burdens on the countries affected and on our neighbors are disastrous. I see you have the pamphlet on Syria. Take the civil war in Syria. The government of Lebanon has opened the doors of its schools to refugee children from Syria, but simply cannot take them all. There are now some 300,000 refugee children out of school in Lebanon, a number that could top 500,000 over the next year. Lebanon absorbing all of the children that have come over from Syria would be the equivalent of New York absorbing the entire school populations of Washington, D.C. and Chicago. Perhaps it is not surprising, given such massive waste of human capital, that no fragile or conflict-affected country, meaning war, has yet achieved a single Millennium Development Goal. We know that what happens in school matters, that education can work for our collective peace and security, but we also know it can work against it. It can incubate or it can mitigate. That is the power it holds over our future prospects. We know that a good quality education is crucial for the creation of cohesive, peaceful, and prosperous societies, and for our collective future security, for nation building, and for tolerance, and for the achievement of a whole range of rights, such as poverty reduction, good health, proper nutrition, and social protection. We know that a good quality education helps children and youth to make good choices for themselves and their communities. They learn that conflict, a natural part of life, need not escalate into violence. We know, as Rebbecca's work has highlighted over the years, that education quality and quantity are inseparable. It is quality that lures children in the classrooms and keeps them there, and it is the quality of education that paves the way for a more secure and prosperous future. And getting children into the classroom is in itself of great value. Rebbecca's research on madrasas in Pakistan suggests that, contrary to most assumptions, they can help to prevent the recruitment of young men into extremist groups. Further proof of the sheer power of education. There are signs of a renewed determination to address this issue, including a strengthened global partnership for education, I'm happy to say. The UN Secretary General's Global Education First, as occasionally weak as it is, and the Education Cannot Wait call for action. No, indeed, the point is you cannot put children on pause. Children cannot wait for war to end. On average, the conflicts in low-income countries from 1999 to 2008 lasted 12 years, on average. That's longer than most children in these countries would typically attend school. So we must position education front and center as a crucial part of peace building and state building, as an effective way to help countries heal their wounds and to prevent violence in the future. We need, above all, to play the long game. This is not rocket science. We know all of this. But there is still a gap between knowledge and action. Policymakers today are struggling with dozens, if not hundreds, of competing demands: the response to climate change, for example, the continuing fallout of recent economic and financial collapses, inequality of opportunity, and in the wake of that inequality, growing social discontent. They need to understand that increasing the school enrollment rate by at least 10% reduces the likelihood of a country experiencing conflict by 3%, and the length of conflicts fall as male enrollment rates increase. Governments need to break out of their comfort zones and break down their own traditional slices. They need to move from a silo approach to a partnership approach. In this interconnected world, development is everybody's business, not just the business of ministries of education or health or social welfare. And governments themselves are no longer the only players in town. There are new kids on the block, a private sector whose investments far exceed official development assistance and need to come on board, as David's work has shown. New donors are emerging from what we once called the developing world, and who work in partnership across the global South. A geographic shift in development away from the traditional Western dominance of the development business. There is an even stronger civil society that is increasingly important in shaping local solutions. And above all, there are people, millions upon millions of them, who are themselves interconnected. And governments are starting to realize that if they do not act, people will get on with it themselves, increasingly skirting around traditional politics to create their own movements, their own responses. People are speaking out as never before. There were 6 billion mobile phone subscriptions in developing countries in 2012. And people are using the new technology to make themselves heard, with 500 million tweets every day last year. People are increasingly vocal. Between 2006 and 2013, 37 protests topped 1 million participants, from around 1 million people protesting against corruption and inequality in Brazil to 100 million protesting about the quality of life in India. The key word here is dialogue. Governments, civil society, businesses, and citizens talking to, and even more importantly, listening to each other. True dialogue may mean communicating with those who have a very different mindset. I know from my own experience at UNICEF how difficult it is to build genuine dialogue with those who skew education for ideological ends. The Taliban in Afghanistan, for example, or al-Shabaab in Somalia. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try, especially when such groups control and even deliver local services. We need to be as fearless as those we are honoring tonight, and as fearless as a young Pakistani girl who was prepared to put her own life on the line in her pursuit of education. If a young girl can do that, the least we can do is speak out loud and clear about the need for education as the foundation for peaceful and tolerant societies. The least we can do is to nurture a new, genuine, and global dialogue on the kind of global society we want. A world that ends the scourges of poverty, of hunger, of ignorance, and rights violations. Dialogue is, by its very nature, humble. Dialogue means switching off the ego and understanding that no single person has all the answers. So may I end with a quote from the man who 700 years ago provided the inspiration for the Rumi Foundation, and who has, in his own way, brought all of us here this evening. And I quote, "Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment. Cleverness is mere opinion. Bewilderment, intuition." Thank you very much.
Thank you for presenting this evening. Thank you very much on behalf of the Rumi Forum.
Thank you. Lovely, beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you, Carol. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now, if you would, please direct your eyes to the screen, and we'll watch a short video presentation on the work of the Rumi Forum. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time to begin our awards ceremony. The first award of the evening will be presented by Virginia Ginny Sloan. She is the president and founder of the Constitution Project. Ms. Sloan previously served as executive director of the Task Force on Gender, Race, and Ethnic Bias of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia, and for 14 years was a counsel to the U.S. House Judiciary Committee. Please welcome Ms. Sloan to the stage to present the first award.
Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here tonight. And I am especially delighted and honored to present the Rumi Peace and Dialogue Award for extraordinary commitment of service to women and human rights to my good friend, Dr. Azizah al-Hibri. Azizah is one of the most courageous, savvy, and committed people I know. Her dedication to peace and dialogue is apparent in everything she does, and I have no doubt will continue to do in the future. I can't do it without my glasses. I am so pleased to present this award on behalf of Rumi, an organization that speaks out with courage and with steadfastness to promote peace in the world and contribute to a peaceful coexistence of the adherents of different faiths, cultures, ethnicities, and races. We badly need the contributions of Rumi, especially today. I've known Azizah for a very long time. I first came to know her in her role as chair of Karama, Muslim Women Lawyers for Human Rights, which she founded in 1993. At the time, she was also a professor at the T.C. Williams School of Law at the University of Richmond. She brought a vital way of thinking and an opportunity for outreach to a variety of communities that my organization, the Constitution Project, very much needed. As a Muslim leader, she stood next to President George W. Bush right after the September 11th attacks to proclaim that Muslims stood with the United States in condemning those attacks. Yet when the Bush administration's activities took our country too far in threatening our rights, Azizah stood strong and spoke out. She continued to speak out through Karama, her other activities, and her work with the Constitution Project shortly after the attacks. The Constitution Project and Karama jointly sponsored a program in Virginia at George Mason after the Bush administration conducted a number of raids and searches on mosques and other Muslim institutions in Virginia that we felt were ethnically and religiously biased, and we held this program to hear from the community and to urge them to stand strong and stand up for their rights, and we were very pleased to sponsor this with Karama. Azizah is also a member of the Constitution Project's Task Force on Detainee Treatment, which produced its report in 2013, finding that this country indeed committed torture, and that approval for those actions came from the highest levels of our government. All of Azizah's work has provided a strong perspective on how to balance national security and human rights and civil liberties. She's taught me a lot, and I know she's taught the members of our task force a lot about Islamic jurisprudence and her belief that our country must protect human rights and civil liberties for all people, even while ensuring that we are strong and safe, and that we condemn those who would do us harm. She is an extremely persuasive voice. One reason I so admire and enjoy working with Azizah is her devotion to women's rights. She began her career as a professor of philosophy and is the co-editor of Technology and Human Affairs and founding editor of Hypatia, a journal of feminist philosophy. When the word feminist, is criticized today by women who should know better. Azizah insists on teaching young women about what it means to be a strong, capable, outspoken, and courageous woman who stands up for equal rights, not just for women, but for all people. She speaks out in this country where the job is perhaps somewhat easier, and through Karama and elsewhere, Azizah instills these values in Muslim women who face challenges American women can only imagine. Azizah is a groundbreaker and an overachiever in so many regards. In 1992, she became the first tenured Muslim law professor in the United States. In addition to her JD, she also has a PhD in philosophy. She's written extensively on women's issues, democracy, and human rights from an Islamic perspective, and has been published in prestigious journals nationwide. She's now completing her own book on Muslim women's rights. She was a Fulbright Scholar, a Fellow at the National Humanities Center, and a presidential appointee to the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. At the request of various institutions, such as the State Department, the United Nations, and local universities and Islamic centers, Azizah has shared her perspectives by speaking throughout Europe, the Middle East, South Asia, North Africa, and the United States. Karama supports the rights of Muslim women worldwide through educational programs, jurisprudential scholarship, and a network of Muslim jurists and leaders. Karama's original research and innovative programming provides Muslim women with the essential tools and knowledge to promote reform in their own communities. For her outstanding work, Azizah received Virginia's first Freedom Award from the Council of America's First Freedom in 2007, as well as the Dr. Betty Shabazz Recognition Award from Women of Islam in 2006, and the Distinguished Educator Award from the University of Richmond in 2004. As always, no matter what task she faces, Azizah lives up to the meaning of Rumi as an organization and its Peace and Dialogue Award. In a world of war and warmongers, Azizah stands for peace and the dialogue it takes to achieve it. I'm so honored to call her my friend, and so thrilled that she is receiving this award tonight. She so richly deserves to take her place among her fellow honorees tonight and in the past, all of whom represent the same commitment to peace and dialogue. Azizah, may I present the award?
Goodness, I don't know what to say after this introduction. She raised your expectations. Distinguished guests, friends, companions on this road for freedom and peace, tonight I'm being honored with a distinguished award for my service and that of Karama for the human rights work we do, especially in the areas of women's rights. Part of our liberating work consists of our network of women jurists examining our sacred text and tradition carefully and peeling away patriarchal influences masquerading as part of the religion itself. But how could I celebrate tonight receiving this award when my sisters, Christians and Muslim, Arab and Kurd, are being sold as cheap slave commodities in the bazaar of terrorism? How could I celebrate when young teenage girls, even if few, have been seduced by ISIS, who is more probably called QSIS, Qaeda separatists in Iraq and Syria, so as to cross continents in their support? These girls have done so not only in the US, but in North Africa, and perhaps other continents as well. The image of women like me, and also much younger than me, being sold or raped or killed is absolutely hurtful and repulsive. The images of mosques, churches, schools, shrines being destroyed are equally so. But more importantly, all of these crimes are being perpetrated in the name of Islam when they directly contradict every element of it. My religion, of which I'm very proud, tells me that all humans were created of the same soul, that God blew a divine breath into Adam during creation, that God himself gave karama, a word that means dignity, to all the children of Adam. He did not give it to the Muslims, or the men, or the rich, but to everyone, every single one of us, as of the moment of creation, regardless of gender, ethnicity, race, or religion. Thus, to debase this divine creation is to sin against God himself, and they call themselves Muslim. When the Prophet Muhammad visited St. Catherine's Monastery in Mount Sinai, he signed a covenant addressed to all Christians of East and West, telling them that the Muslims would have their back, as he did also in the Medina Charter with the Jewish tribes. That their churches, he told the Christians, their crosses, their icons, their monks would all be safe, and that this covenant held till the end of time and bound all the followers of Muhammad, and that those who violate it would be cursed till the end of time. St. Catherine's Monastery has a copy of that covenant. Let there be no doubt, ISIS is violating fundamental Islamic principles. And we need to say that clearly and loudly, because as Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib once said, to be silent in the face of evil is to be a mute devil. So here it is. Although we at Karama serve our community and others in need, while avoiding even the scent of politics, I have now seemingly broken that rule in the name of human rights, women's rights, and mutual interfaith solidarity and friendship. For these same reasons, I joined years ago the task force on detainee treatment formed by the Constitution Project, of which Jenny spoke. I discovered practices by our government that shock the conscience, at least the conscience of the founding fathers who believe in due process and human dignity. How could this happen in America? Day in, day out, we are still, right now, torturing through force feeding. Just read our report. It's on the internet. As you and I sit down to eat dinner, several prisoners who have never been tried for a crime are being shackled, humiliated, and repeatedly force-fed. All this needs to stop, all of it. But how do we stop it? It's obviously hard. I'm not naive to think that we can push a button. But we all need to go back to first principles. In my humble view, evil cannot be defeated except through the good. The good in this case is to understand the value of human life. We can achieve this good in many ways, but we at Karama believe that education, while slow, is the most stable and productive approach. So in our Law and Leadership Summer Program, for example, which attracts Muslim women from Kenya and Egypt to Saudi Arabia and the Maldives, we educate all participants about the dignity of each human being, the importance of human rights, the respect for women and the rights guaranteed them by our religion. We also educate them about our American constitutional system and the human rights principles embedded in it, such as guaranteeing everyone the right to have their day in court. We also teach them about the various commonalities among the faiths. But unfortunately, we all know that the common values that are at the foundations of our faiths have been seriously compromised these days for some other gain. All faiths. Yet we should all remember, let me quote from the Bible, "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul?" So maybe it is a good idea to remember universal human rights principles, educate about them, and join each other in building bridges among all faiths and among people, so that we can all meet one day in the garden of peace and tranquility. The wait has been long and hard, but together we shall get there one day. Soon? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. al-Hibri. Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the second award of the evening will be Ambassador Tony Hall. Ambassador Tony Hall is a leading global advocate for hunger relief in programs and improving human rights. Ambassador Hall previously served as the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Agencies for Food and Agriculture in Rome, Italy. Prior to his diplomatic service, Ambassador Hall represented the 3rd District of Ohio in the U.S. House of Representatives for 24 years and is Dayton, Ohio's longest-serving representative. Ambassador Hall is Executive Director Emeritus of the Alliance to End Hunger. Please welcome Ambassador Hall to the stage.
Well, thank you very much. I have the great pleasure of introducing my friend David Beckmann. He is the president of Bread for the World, which is, in my opinion, the #1 premier hunger advocacy group in the country. He's also the president of the Bread for the World Institute. He's president of my organization called the Alliance to End Hunger. The Alliance to End Hunger is an organization that believes that if you're going to work on poverty and hunger, you got to bring everybody into the room. It just doesn't belong to the government. It belongs to everybody. It belongs to corporations and businesses and individuals and colleges and universities and nonprofits and all faiths, Christians, Muslims, and Jewish organizations and religions. And in reading the Rumi Peace and Dialogue Awards, David really fits this award. He's a man of dignity. He's a man of reconciliation. He's a man of great wisdom. He's also the recipient of the top award in the world for food security and poverty alleviation. It's the World Food Prize. This is the top award in the world. I mean, that's really all I have to say. He got the award. It's pretty amazing. He's a graduate of Yale. He's a graduate of the London School of Economics. He's a ordained Lutheran pastor. He worked a number of years for the World Bank. He served in Ghana and Bangladesh. He's an author. He has 2 children, beautiful wife. The last thing I want to say about him is when I was a U.S. Congressman, I was chairman of the Select Committee on Hunger for a number of years, and David was one of the 2 or 3 people that I would always call for advice about legislation, ideas that I might have. And I did this because of his wisdom, of his dignity, of his ethics, and of his friendship. And I've just given you really the highlights. And he's an amazing man, good man. He's done so much for this country. David Beckmann.
Thank you, Ambassador Hall. It's a great honor to be introduced in such a generous way by Tony Hall. It's also a profound honor to be his colleague and friend. Tony Hall, during his years in Congress, was more closely identified with hungry people than any other member of Congress. Just year after year, he spoke out for hungry people in our country and in all the toughest places. When North Korea was a pariah, Tony said, we've got to do something about hunger in North Korea, just place after place. Then he served as U.S. ambassador to the World Food Program, and instead of staying in Rome and enjoying Rome like any civilized person would do, Tony went around the world and met with warlords and heads of state to try to negotiate humanitarian access. That is, to allow the World Food Program and the charities that work with it to get to hungry people even in enemy territory. So being introduced in a generous way by Tony Hall and having the chance to work with him and seeing him in action still fighting for hungry people is itself a great honor. Let me just explain what Bread for the World, in my words, what Bread for the World and the Alliance to End Hunger are about. And we really have, Tony and I think, are pretty upbeat about what we can do to get change and justice for hungry people, and in fact, upbeat about the possibility of moving toward a world that would be virtually without hunger and extreme poverty. Bread for the World organizes Christians of all stripes, Catholics and Protestants of all varieties in this religiously diverse country. We organize people to put pressure on their members of Congress on issues that are important to hungry people in our country or around the world. So international development assistance funding or funding for the programs that help people in our country who have a hard time feeding their kids, or also improvements in those programs, policy issues. And the Alliance to End Hunger we set up about 10 years ago, as Tony said, to engage diverse organizations in changing the public and political will in a way that will help us end hunger. And I think one of the Alliance's finest achievements, in fact, has been to strengthen the advocacy for hungry people that some Jewish and some Muslim organizations do. And it's become a forum where people who care about hunger and poverty and the different faith traditions come together and work together for real change. Let me just give you one example of why we think we can, in fact, make the United States get more serious about hunger and poverty in our own country and around the world. And that is the struggle of the last 4 years to protect programs for hungry and poor people in the U.S. budget debate. You might remember that the debate really got underway in the spring of 2011. The Tea Party had won big in November 2010, and so it became clear in the spring of 2011 that the whole House Republican caucus was going to push for deep, deep cuts in government spending. And 2/3 of their proposed cuts would come from programs that go only to low income, to poor people, 2/3 of their cuts. Mainly Medicaid, SNAP, but also international development assistance tax credits for the working poor, just about everything. And you might remember that Democrats at that moment were under strict instructions from their political consultants not to mention the word poverty. They were struggling for the middle class. They were protecting Social Security, not Medicaid. And so it was Tony, actually, who suggested that some of us go on a long fast. And so a group of religious leaders of different varieties committed ourselves to a long fast. Thanks to the internet, about 40,000 people participated in that fast. And it was really we really were asking God for guidance for us and for our nation. And then over the subsequent years, hundreds of thousands of people of goodwill of all kinds, but especially maybe people of faith, insisted with their own members of Congress that we could solve our nation's budget problems without taking it out on people who sometimes go hungry in this country or around the world. And the dust is almost settled on that debate. We'll see what happens after the elections in early next year, but at least this last year has been fairly quiet. And what's striking is that the total cuts to programs that are focused on poor people have come to only 2% of what the House Republicans pushed for in a very persistent, insistent way for 3 or 4 years. And so I think, it's just an example that relatively small numbers of people who care and weigh in on an issue like that can make a big difference, That was this, and there was this central issue in Washington for 3 years. And basically, the President and Congress were able to make substantial cuts in deficits without any substantial cuts in programs for poor people. Looking ahead, we are struck, as Carol said, that the world is making dramatic progress against hunger, poverty, and disease. Never before in the whole history of humanity have we seen such progress. We've cut the number of people in extreme poverty in half since 1990. The number of people who are hungry has almost been cut in half in that same period. The number of kids who die every day has been cut in half. It's just unbelievable. I think this is God. This is God moving in our time. And it's happened in all kinds of countries. Bangladesh, Tanzania, Brazil, Mexico, Great Britain has reduced child poverty. So we know a lot about what to do to continue that progress. I think even if we don't try very much, there's a lot of momentum. We're going to see continued progress against hunger, poverty, and disease. And if we try, especially if we in this nation can get our country to get serious about hunger and poverty, we could virtually end hunger and extreme poverty by 2030, which is likely to be the international target year. We've seen in our own country that 1,000 points of light is not enough light. You need to have the U.S. government provide a framework in which community groups, states, poor people themselves, businesses can play their role. But, if Ethiopia, if Tanzania can reduce poverty, why not D.C., Virginia, Maryland? Why can't we do that? Ironically, the poverty rate's gone up in this country since 1990. But it's because we haven't made it a national priority since Johnson and Nixon. That can be changed. And so our project, Bread's project, the Alliances project, is to try to mobilize the necessary political will in our U.S. government so that, in fact, we see progress toward and finally the end of hunger in America and around the world by 2030. It won't happen without a lot of pushing by, I think especially by people of faith, people who are somehow gripped by the divine and led by their faith to insist on justice for the least of these, justice for people in poverty and hunger. These issues, I really want to thank the Rumi Forum for this award, and also for bringing us all together, because we're all interconnected, and the issues that we're talking about are all interconnected issues. Intercultural dialogue, I think that means people getting along. You know, people getting along, justice for hungry people, education, justice for women. The International Food Policy and Research Institute did a study which showed that half of the dramatic improvements in child nutrition that have been made in developing countries in recent decades have been due to improvements in the education and status of women. So this is all one thing. And these justice issues all interconnect with peace. As Carol said, when you don't have peace, you don't have progress for people. And if we can, in fact, end hunger, it would contribute in a very powerful way to peace. Thanks.
Thank you, Reverend Beckmann. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome once again Carol Bellamy to the stage to present the third and final award of the evening.
I am delighted to have the opportunity to present this award to Rebbecca Winthrop. Rebbecca, you have been an inspiration over the years to me and to countless others working on education. You have provided robust, authoritative, and incisive analysis and clear policy advice that have helped to fuel the impressive progress that has been made on education for all in recent years. As we ask ourselves where next for education, you're always a few steps ahead of us, showing us the way, showing us how access to education and quality of education are two sides of the same coin. How the quality of education makes all the difference when it comes to enticing children into the classroom and keeping them there to reach their full potential. You have that rare combination of intellectual integrity and rigor, backed by years of experience in the field, in some particularly tough places for an educationalist. I'm thinking particularly of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Sudan, and among the most disadvantaged and marginalized communities, including displaced and migrant communities, some of the very communities that we need to reach if we are going to ultimately reach education for all. Your leadership on education in emergencies, and more recent, which means education in conflict, and more recently on working to improve learning with a specific focus on issues related to measurement, the Learning Metrics Task Force, a terrific organization that led by Brookings and led by Rebbecca, has been exemplary, demonstrating the art of the possible in situations that were once seen as hopeless. I've leaned on your work at the International Baccalaureate, at the Global Partnership for Education, and you know, particularly at GPE. And on a personal note, I want to thank you for your vision and clarity and for your ability to turn detailed research into compelling messages that resonate with policymakers, those who can actually make a difference. In my view, to say that this award is well-deserved by Rebbecca is an understatement. All of those who care about the education of the world's children, indeed care about many, if not all children sitting in classrooms today, owe you, Rebbecca, their heartfelt thanks. Rebbecca, please.
Good evening. Thank you so much to all of you, but especially thanks to the Rumi Forum. It's a real honor to be awarded in such amazing company tonight and also in previous awards. I'm very grateful, and humbled and inspired by the mission of the Rumi Forum around dialogue across many different divides that I think is incredibly important in our world, in all of our personal lives, family, work, and globally. I also wanted to say a big special thank you to Carol Bellamy, who, as you could see from her speech tonight, is an incredible intellect, but she is also a real firepower. And it's much better to be Carol's friend than the other way around. She is formidable and visionary and has had a huge impact on in the global education community. So I want to thank her for that. I wanted to just say a couple things. First, I wanted to share with all of you how I even got into global education. I started out actually as a youth environmental activist. I grew up in a very small town in Oregon and was very into recycling and planting trees and that type of a thing. It actually never occurred to me to go into education. And then I started, I did an internship in college in banana plantations in Latin America. And that opened my eyes in an incredible way to the vast differentials in opportunity and well-being in poor communities in the developing world to poor communities in my hometown or area or the United States. Both have large needs, but ever since then, and I had two experiences that shaped my interest in education. One was, again, working on this banana plantation with, whoops, I almost knocked my award over. That would have been problematic. With a range of banana workers who should have been wearing protective clothing. They were spraying lots of very dangerous pesticides. And when I asked them, why are you not doing that? They said, well, actually, we didn't, they couldn't read. They couldn't read. They didn't know how to put they couldn't follow the directions. So that was my first sort of thought of, literacy, seems like a foundational important thing. My second experience, again, I was working in Latin America. I'd returned right after college. I was working with refugees, and one of the things I was working on was legal reforms for women who had been victims of gender-based violence. And these were incredibly important reforms, would take a long time to be put in place, but were incredibly important in terms of the rights of victims of gender-based violence. And when I went and talked to the women and read what they wanted in terms of getting up to speed on what those reforms are, they said, actually, we appreciate these reforms, they're incredibly important, but we are all suffering from, domestic violence. It's hard to live in our homes. And really what we would like is literacy programs, because we cannot read, we cannot write, and we cannot leave. And again, ever since those two experiences, I started thinking a lot about education and how fundamental it is to be able to read and write, to be able to name the world in your own words, to be able to be free. You can travel where you want to go in the world because you're able to navigate on your own. I mean, if you've ever known someone who's not able to read or write, or just imagine for a moment, if you're not, none of you in the room, I'm sure, are illiterate, but you probably wouldn't be here if you weren't highly educated. But it is a very small world and a very small life. Not in terms of dignity or worth, but in terms of opportunity and ability. to do what you would like to do if you're not literate. So that is what inspired me to get into education, into global education. There is needs in our own country. I concentrated around the world and worked in many countries around the world, and now at the Brookings Institution feel very privileged to be able to work with incredible colleagues thinking about policy and how to have a bigger impact and how to scale up reforms and how to drive resources and attention to these issues. We work on a wide range of things, including and in particular girls' education, and trying to lift the global ambition for girls' education. Carol talked a lot about the scope of global education, but just a few thoughts for all of you, remaining thoughts before the night is out. The world has been focused heavily on making sure girls and boys enroll in school in equal numbers, and that is incredibly worthy and a job that's not yet done. But there are vast, quote-unquote, hotspots, girls' education hotspots in the world that was mentioned, certainly some of them tonight. And those are areas where looking at getting kids into school in equal numbers is not enough. You have to look at safety. There are literally girls who, several people mentioned Malala, but she is one of many, 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 many girls who put their life on the line when they try to get educated. So safety, you have to look at quality. There's 250 million kids around the world, a vast majority of them in school, having spent 4 years in school and cannot read and write. And if you cannot learn to read and write in the first 4 years of school, anybody who has kids, or if you can remember back, you're not really going to have a good, successful educational trajectory. You cannot go on and master your history or your science, et cetera, and you're going to drop out. So what's the point of access in some ways if you're not actually able to give kids the skills they need to be successful? And lastly, one of the most important pieces, this is what I want to end on, is in girls' education is making sure that we can find a lot better ways, and this is something that I think the Rumi Forum is a piece of what they're so focused on, a lot better ways of supporting local leaders to find solutions. It's very hard if you are a girls' education entrepreneur or local community leader to find the support, financial or otherwise, to keep going. And a lot of them get burned out along the way. So supporting local leaders to do this work, I think, is incredibly important. And I want to just say that, like the previous speakers, there's a lot we can do with little time that we have and little effort. A lot can be accomplished. And this is, particularly in girls' education, this is an area that has seen huge progress, and there's still a long way to go. But there's a lot that can be done if we all put our mind to it and work together. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Rebbecca. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my great honor and pleasure to introduce Dr. Zeki Saritoprak. Dr. Saritoprak is professor and Bediüzzaman Said Nursi Chair in Islamic Studies at John Carroll University, and he is the founder of the Rumi Forum. Please welcome him to the stage.
Good evening. It's a great honor to be here. And thank you, Emre. Thank you very much for this wonderful event, making these beautiful things possible. Your Excellencies, honorees, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor to be here and to be able to speak to you tonight on the 15th anniversary of the founding of the Rumi Forum. I will be very brief. I think it will be about 5 to 7 minutes. In these brief remarks, I would like to say a few words about how the Rumi Forum started and the goal I envisioned when I was inspired to begin the forum. And I have to say that there are many people in our gathering today here who supported me greatly when I established the forum. And my envision was that Rumi Forum will contribute to dialogue and peace building. Let me take you back to 1999 and a three-story building on the corner of Wisconsin Avenue and M Street. As I am sure many of you are aware, this is one of the busiest streets in DC. In the small office, we had above Nathan's restaurant. I had envisioned a steady stream of visitors. I thought that as our sign was visible, we would have 200 people knock on our door every day. I was calculating approximately 100,000 people are daily passing under our window, so they will see and they will come and then see us. That was my understanding at that time. I was wrong. I realized that in America, one needs to invite people. We needed to print flyers and work to get people through our door. Eventually, we began to have success, and so today's gathering indicates the Rumi Forum has blossomed, grown, and matured since I left. And congratulations again to Emre and all previous directors of the Rumi Forum. I think that the Rumi Forum is moving in the right direction with its commitment to interfaith dialogue and intercultural dialogue and peace building, particularly with the people of the book, Christians and Jews. A close look into the holy text of Islam, which is my area of expertise, I have to explain a little bit about this, clearly shows that dialogue is one of the core teachings of Islam. This is especially true for dialogue between Muslims and the people of the book. It's a term used for Christians and Jews in the Quran. This dialogue is commanded in the Quran. Commanded is like a compulsory. The Holy Book says, "O people of the book, come to a common word or common ground that is between you and us, that we worship none but God." The Quran also reminds us to debate with the people of the book in the most beautiful way. Thus, in dialogue, there should be nothing but positive words and actions. That is the meaning of the most beautiful way that the Quran describes. Although the Quran speaks of one common ground between all people of the book, that is to worship one God, the Quran does not limit the common ground to this. Yes, this is considered the greatest example of the common ground, but I argue that based on this principle, Jews, Christians, Muslims, and the adherents of other traditions can come together and work for common goods, such as justice, human rights, protection of the environment, maintaining the dignity of human beings, and combating social problems such as poverty, drug addiction, human trafficking, just to name a few. In the interest of time, I will not elaborate further on this, but I have to say I have written on this extensively, so I would like you to explore those writings. I am pleased that there are some Muslims who have dedicated themselves to this dialogue. As an example, I would like to mention people who inspired by the teachings of Fethullah Gülen, a prominent Turkish Islamic scholar. As a Jesuit scholar and a priest, you might know Father Thomas Michel. In one of his lectures at John Carroll University in Cleveland, Ohio, where I came from, observed that people of the Hizmet movement, the people of this movement called Hizmet movement or Gülen movement, inspired by Mr. Gülen, contribute the greatest share of themselves and their resources to the causes of interfaith and intercultural dialogue. And I think that's a good testimony to observe this. In the US, there are dialogue centers across the country run and organized by the people of the Hizmet movement. So finally, I am very hopeful, despite all these negative things going around us. I am optimistic, and I am very hopeful that such dialogue efforts will lead to a greater understanding, love, and respect among all people. There is a quote from the Turkish scholar Nursi that we named a chair at John Carroll University after him, and I frequently quote this because I really like this quote. Nursi said, he passed away in 1960, so that's what he says. We sacrificed ourselves to love. There is no place in our hearts for hatred. I think if we take this statement to heart, the world will indeed be a better place. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you had a wonderful evening this evening and you enjoyed your dinner and the program. We would like to invite the awardees to the stage and the award presenters for a group photo, and the president of the Rumi Forum, present and past, to come to the stage. And we hope to see you soon, very, very, very soon. Thank you. Have a great evening.